Greetings, I'm Keith Klein, the host of the VentureFizz podcast, where I interview the most fascinating people in the tech scene. This is episode 367, and today's guest is Vivjan Myrto, founder and managing partner at Hyperplane. Will Boston be the star of the AI revolution? This is the title of an article that Zach Winn wrote for VentureFizz about 7 years ago. Yes, VentureFizz was ahead of the curve too. It talks about the history of AI in the Boston area, including Marvin Minsky's first neural net machine back in 1951, the amazing academic institutions, plus the state of the tech ecosystem back then. Vivjan was featured in this article, along with this quote, "I think machine intelligence represents a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for entrepreneurs," end quote. It's super impressive to see how Vivjan and his partners were well ahead of the AI hype machine as they built Hyperplane's focus around backing the best founding teams in the AI sector, along with other innovations in hard tech like robotics, sensors, and more. The firm's name is even based on a term in machine learning applications, that being a higher dimensional plane used to help categorize data based on its underlying structure from images to real-world events. In this episode of our podcast, we cover lots of great topics, like Vivjan's inspirational background story from growing up in Albania to fighting cancer and moving to the United States for treatment and learning how to speak English while he was in the hospital, going on to build a healthcare startup that was acquired, how Hyperplane came to fruition, and how they raised their first fund, all the details about Hyperplane and the firm's area of focus for investments, a deep dive into Modulate, one of their portfolio companies, advice on taking the entrepreneurial leap, a discussion around the Boston tech scene and its areas for improvement, his passion for wind sports and photography, and so much more. All right, now a brief word from our podcast sponsor, Silicon Valley Bank. I'm excited to share that this podcast is brought to you by one of the strongest longtime supporters of the local startup ecosystem, that being Silicon Valley Bank, a division of First Citizens Bank. SVB serves innovative tech, healthcare, and life sciences companies, including 60% of CNBC's Disruptor 50 list, 72% of Forbes Cloud 100 list, and 48% of Forbes AI 50 list companies. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. All right, without further ado, here's my interview with Vivjan. Vivjan, thanks so much for joining us.
Keith, pleasure to be here.
I'm so excited to talk to you because I don't know why, I just have this memory of meeting you for the first time. And I think it was right when you were starting to get Hyperplane off the ground, if my memory's correct, or you were just starting to get into investing, something to that effect. Maybe my memory's failing me, but who knows? But anyways, I was preparing for this interview, and I just ended up stumbling across this article that VentureFizz had published that was dated 2017. Zach Winn wrote it, and he did an amazing job. And he talked about why Boston will be the star of the AI revolution. Now, again, 2017, and you were one of the people that he interviewed for this piece because that's been kind of the foundation of your firm. So I thought it would be really fun to kind of revisit, one, I'm going to include a link to this article in the show notes, but two, kind of, here we are, 8 years later, where is Boston in this AI revolution?
Yeah, and certainly, I think at the beginning when Hyperplane started, we have been very bullish on Boston since the beginning. I think if you look at the history of Boston, from the Route 128, to today, it's been really exciting, at least in our journey, starting Hyperplane in 2015 till today, to see Boston really, excel in some areas, like robotics, fintech and so on. So in our experience, a couple of things have really evolved, since we started. Number one was, I remember meeting one of my co-founders, Brendan, at the Harvard Innovation Lab, back in 2014, 2015. And at the time, that lab at Harvard was, essentially just one table with 5 chairs around it. And you fast forward today, that is, 3 different buildings, in the Harvard, on the Harvard campus. MIT Engine Fund did not exist. The MIT Media Lab was not as commercially focused as it is today. And so I think the Boston academic, community, including, Northeastern, which I think sends something like 120, different startups every year through the multiple programs that they have there. The academic community in Boston is certainly, bounds and leaps in how much has evolved, since the beginning to be more commercially focused, to commercialize a lot of the research to commercialize a lot of the algorithms, sitting at the AI labs, sitting at the machine learning labs, and across all of these campuses, from biology, to marketing, to finance, to just so many disciplines. And it's just been absolutely remarkable to be a part of this community, and since the very beginning of this, of this wave of AI that is coming. On the other side of it, outside of academia, I think for us, it's always also been, incredibly rewarding. And it's been, really great to also see the more recent IPOs of Toast, of Klaviyo, a lot of this like really big companies in the Boston area. And certainly, we all know the usual suspects like Wayfair, HubSpot, and so on, to really start to see a lot more spin-outs now, and to see a talent really grown in some of the top tech businesses, in America. So, academia side has been fantastic. I think what has been even better than expected from us, it's certainly been also the tech enterprise, large company spin-out information. So that's been great. And I think to answer your question in short, where we are today, I think we're, still at this like new beginning of AI. AI has been so, has evolved so much since we started. And I think Boston is certainly entering a new age with it, where company formation has been faster and more rapid than ever before from both academia and, large, spin-outs.
And I'm going to double down. I agree. I mean, yeah. I'm bullish on Boston all the time, so I'm the ultimate optimist. But there is this AI wave that's been forming of these repeat founders, especially, that are building something again. Like the founder of Cyber Reasons now doing 7AI. You've got the founders of SessionM and Josh Summers from his company Clipped that are now doing NFI. You got John Andrews that was in Deca, and then he had Select. Now he's doing Simulate, which is retail, e-commerce, AI search. So there's a whole generation of entrepreneurs that are building something, and they're uniquely qualified to build what they're doing, which usually equals greater levels of success. And then there's the spin-outs, like you saw, like the first-time founders coming out of the Toast and the other companies. There's a lot going on, so it's going to be a great year. Fingers crossed.
Fingers crossed. And one more thought there is also, we have seen, we firsthand, we've seen one of our very first founders that we founded at Hyperplane, just reached out to us recently, starting a new company. So even in a young firm like us, we're starting to see these repeat founders building new businesses, right? So it's just been absolutely wonderful. And I think, the other thing that founders like the ones that you mentioned alongside, like Andy Payne, for example, or Steve Pappas, or some of the, founders that have been here for so long, they're starting to invest a lot more, I think, as angels in the community. And Klaviyo and, all the new recent IPOs has produced a lot more angel investors as well. So that's been also really exciting from the investing side. It's just the angel community is younger, and I think it's a lot more active, that we've seen it in years past as well.
All right, let's rewind the clock. Let's talk about your background story. So where'd you grow up? What were you like as a child?
Yeah, it's a long story, and I'll give you sort of the insight of it all. How I came to be here, and it's a bit of a different path to venture for me, and I think it's just been long story short, I grew up in Albania. I was born in Albania in the early '80s, and very communist country at the time. And as we switched to a more capitalist society in '91, I started my first little business when I was 7. I was born in a family of doctors and engineers and public servants, so an incredibly intellectually wealthy family. But growing up in a communist, everybody started from zero in terms of wealth back in the '90s. And I started my little business, when I was 7, and then got my hands on my first computer when I was about 9. And back in the day, that computer weighed something like 70 pounds, and it had huge floppy disks. And to play a game, there was no Windows 3.1, or there was no interface. And so you had to learn, how to code a little bit. And so I started to taught myself how to do that. And 2 years after that, one of my cousins started one of the first internet service providers in the country. So internet came, in that side of the world around 95, 96, 97. I convinced him basically to hire me as one of his first salespeople. So I started selling the internet door to door when I was about 13 years old, on nights and weekends, and sometimes, skipping half a day of school to do that. And essentially, the market was tiny. It was 10 homes and 3 high schools, but that's what I tried. That's what I tried to do. And it was an incredible experience to be early on and to see the power of the internet. Unfortunately, life took a little bit of, bad turn, and I got really sick, and I was diagnosed with cancer when I was 15, and moved to Italy for a year and a half, which that treatment did not work. And eventually, as a Hail Mary, found my way, to come to the United States in December of 2001 here. I did not speak English at the time. I came alone, and it was the coldest I've ever experienced in the Boston area, and checked myself in a hospital and spent there basically about 4 years, culminating in a bone marrow transplant in 2003, 2004. And then spent another year recovering from that. By the time I had learned English, thankfully had got my hands on some books that the nurses gave me and so on. And I began my my American journey in 2004 after those 4 years here. And still to this day, one of the biggest lucks of my life is to move to the United States and build my career, basically from zero, since 2004.
Well, I know you gave us the quick version, but I've talked to over 350 founders and investors, and this is one of these stories that is just perseverance. Like, it's amazing what you were able to accomplish, selling the internet door to door, which I think sales is something that everyone should learn how to do. And then obviously your life took a drastic shift and you had to figure out, okay, how am I going to get treatment? Italy, come to the United States, don't know how to speak English, and you learn, and then you spent all those years in the hospital. And, we're going to continue to talk about your story.
Yeah.
It's just right there is like, just shows the power of, just keeping on.
Yeah. I just have to say that I think it's an absolute privilege, to be a venture investor and to be a founder, because we meet all the time so many people that are just as resilient, and so many people that are just as ambitious, and people that have gone through such incredible struggles. And I think you've had some of in your podcast as well, and probably in the future as well, like Krenar. But it is a remarkable country, remarkable opportunities here, and it is it's a privilege to also meet other people and now be on the board of some of these companies with others that have gone through just as big struggles and building companies a bit against all odds. So it's just it really is a privilege to be in the venture.
Well, after fighting cancer and your recovery, what did you end up doing?
So after that, I basically asked the nurse there, it's like, how do you get to university? And sort of the more personal story. But I just asked her, how do you get to university? And she said something like, well, you got to take your SATs and so on. And at the time, the SATs was the best out of 1,600, and I took the SATs and I ended up getting 1590, almost a perfect score, and which was very
I'm
lucky.
not going to tell you what I got.
Yeah. I mean, it was to be all completely honest, it was lucky because on the English side I did guess a bunch of things, but on the math side I was pretty good, and that led me to go to a technical school, here in Boston, and there. My family, unfortunately, my mom and sister moved a little bit after me, here, and going through chemo and a bone marrow was very expensive, and left us with very little, if not nothing. And going to college, certainly I could not afford it. So I started, what I did, when I was 7, I started, working, and I started a few little businesses and whatever I could, basically. And one of those companies convinced one of my roommates to basically start a software business that would help other patients like myself, to have better, records of their medical treatments, and certainly ones that are coming from outside of the US here and vice versa, so they don't have to go through, sort of the emotional and the financial, hardship of transferring everything. It's certainly very emotionally taxing, to go through everything all over again. And so we started a business basically that, did that. And that business, we bootstrapped it, did really well, made our first money through that, sold it, some years after, sold it in 2007, 2008. And then after that, tried to start a new business, a tech company. And somebody said, well, you should raise money from from General Catalyst and or Flybridge or so on at the time. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I can't believe there's people here that, will finance a business without any revenue or customers and just an idea. So that's how it was my first interaction, or my first time that I ran into, venture capital. And I was just it was just, oh my gosh, it was just, I remember the day, and it was just remarkable that, there's this, I mean, I don't call it a job, and it's just absolutely amazing that, we have a platform, where we can invest in new ideas and founders all the time. And most importantly, just learn about, sort of the impact. And when I started, that company, I was a pre-med, before that. Wanted to be like everybody in my family, to be a doctor. And when you're raised in a family of doctors, I think you're raised with this idea and sense that the best thing and the most, important thing you can do in life is to help others all the time. And when you write, your first lines of code, you realize that those few lines that can impact millions, tens of millions of people, versus 10 patients at a time. And I think of venture is sort of like that on steroids a little bit, because it's a platform where you can impact so many different industries, you can impact so many different, people, and it's just absolutely remarkable. So that was my first basic interaction with that. And, I wanted to be a part of it. I wanted to invest in companies. I wanted to meet people all the time. I wanted to hear ideas all the time. I really wanted to, to do that. And, back then, the Boston community, I think, was just a bit different than it is today. And I had networked as well at the time, building these businesses and sort of myself. And started, a small nonprofit, joined, I guess, both Chris and Dave, and, built this nonprofit. It was a demo night at the time. If you remember, Webino from NextView was a quarterly event.
I remember it well.
David and Rob and, started Webino at the time. It was a quarterly event, and we did a monthly event where people would present their ideas all the time. And, I think Boston New Tech still goes on today. And there was the beginning of forming our community around us. And community is one of the most important things, if not the most important thing, around building a venture. But what ended up happening is that I started to see, a lot of opportunities, and I wanted to invest in a lot of them. The difference between my partner John and I is that I want to invest in everything. John is a little more conservative, so it's a really, really great match. And we'll get to John a little bit later. But and then basically that was the first time that I made an investment. Was I found this company that was tackling, building basically a platform, a machine learning platform for genomic sequencing, how to standardize a lot of the genome data, that we're getting at the time. And it was a remarkable first company, and through that, I invested my personal money. And I had the great fortune of meeting my co-founder, John, during that first investment. And John, at the time, was at a firm called Point Judith Capital, today is known as PJC, here in the community. And he was the only known partner there, basically leading deals and sitting on boards and so on. So was very nervous to talk to John the first time, to be completely honest. Big shot VC in Boston. I was absolutely nobody. And but we saw eye to eye on a lot of things and ended up investing together in that business in a company called Puriverse that was started by Adam Berry, who was also one of the co-founders of Brightcove at the time that went public, and Jeremy Allaire and that whole this whole founders, and Adam was just absolutely remarkable founder, and I was very fortunate to invest in him at the very beginning and sort of started my journey into investing, through that.
Very, very cool. Yes. Boston New Tech still exists today. It's such an important part of the ecosystem. And when I was doing my research, I was like, oh, wow, I didn't know you were involved with that in the early days. So what they've done is really, really meaningful. So, all right. So now you're actually creating your own venture capital firm, which I think a lot of people might wonder, like, how do you actually institutionalize a VC firm, right? Like, how do you actually make it an actual thing versus doing your own angel investing as your own, unique entity, maybe collaborating with some other people?
Yeah. I can tell you my journey, through that, because I think it's very different today. And when we started, Hyperplane at the very beginning, our first investment, 2014, 2015, the world was very different. There was not a lot of podcasts at the time. There's not a lot of books that tell you how to build a firm. So we had to sort of do it and learn by ourselves. But, starting the journey, one of the biggest lucks that I had was I found my mentor. I found a bunch of mentors and a few people that wanted to back me. And I learned a lot through that, community that supported me. But Hyperplane essentially started in, we incorporated in 2014, and in August 2014 at the time. The entity that I had doing my angel investment was called Boston Global Ventures. I absolutely love the Boston community and, the founders here, and always thought about sort of the outsized outreach that this community has in the world. And it was kind of a cheesy name, but that was at the beginning when we started. And that's how we founded the company in August 2014. John and I basically, we wanted to do two things. Number one, we believed that, pre-seed and seed, stage would be a lot more institutional as rounds. I think with cloud and, sort of the infrastructure, more robust infrastructure, at the time you could see a path where companies would take less capital to get off the ground. And, we wanted to invest very, very early on. And the second thing that, we really wanted to do is invest in artificial intelligence. And those were the two main things. And AI at the time, certainly not as big as it is, and certainly not as everywhere as it is. But it was very clear to us at the time, with so much data and the infrastructure and, some of the networking power and computing power and all of these things really, making leaps and bounds, it was very clear that a lot of these like algorithms sitting at MIT and Harvard and so on really come into the real world in things like transportation or even your Netflix account for that matter. So, we basically put a shingle up in January 2015 and said that, we're here to invest in pre-seed and seed and AI B2B companies. And that's basically what we've been doing for the last 10 years. So when we started, one of our first investors, and, sort of another story, but, how Hyperplane came to be is that, one of my early founders said something like, Boston Global Ventures, like, it's a good name, but like, it doesn't really describe who you guys are. You're young, you're energetic, and you're so full of passion. And when I think of Boston Global Ventures, I think of like, a really old bank.
So
and,
true.
And
So
one
true.
night in our office, basically, we were having, a few beers and talking about a few companies. And we picked up, we had a machine learning, textbook in one of the desks, and started looking for them. And Hyperplane, certainly a technical term in machine learning, and it was between that and Reaper's complexity, the two different formulas, and ended up going with Hyperplane.
I think you picked the right one.
Yeah, I think so too. So, and I don't really mind if people confuse it with, very fast plane. That's really cool also. But Hyperplane basically was the name that we started in late 2015, raised our first fund in 2015. We started making investments as soon as we had a first close, of that fund. So I wish I could have saved the check that my first investor ever gave me, but we had to go and cash it as soon as we could, so we can make investments and essentially build this firm, from that first $25K check in May of 2015.
And how do you get LPs to, like, it's not like you had this rich history of a portfolio and you've had, tried and true success in the venture capital industry to raise your own fund. Like, how did you get LPs to back Hyperplane?
The short answer is a lot of luck, but also I think that I think in all seriousness, it took a long time. I think it was a lot of networking. I think it was just, banging on so many doors, and, we've heard so many no's over the years. And certainly at the very beginning, it was just very difficult. And I think the biggest challenge we had was, what's AI? Why would you invest in this? It's still a winter. There's never really going to be a commercial opportunity, all kinds of things. But we're very convinced, and we kept banging on more doors until, a few people started to, to really, I think, see the opportunity. But most importantly, some investors just really liked our passion and vision for what we saw where the world would go. And we got the first checks very, in mid 2015. We had the first close around then as well. And we started to invest. And as soon as you start to invest, you see a little bit more traction in the companies. A lot of the, newer LPs coming in later after the first close of that fund could touch and feel a little bit what the portfolio would be like. They liked a lot of the companies that we had invested. They liked the founders that we had invested. We were also in really good company with folks like General Catalyst, 406 Ventures at the time were some of the first few ones, and the list kept growing from there. So it started to build a lot more confidence, I think, around the LP community of investing in Hyperplane and the companies that we were investing in. And that's how it kind of all started a little bit. And I think the good fortune about LPs is that they start to snowball a little bit. Once you get a few ones, then they will introduce it to new ones. And it started just to grow from there for us. And, through the journey, I also met, and I mentioned earlier, I met a few of our mentors that are still mentors to us today. And they started to open more doors for us, people that have been in the private equity and the venture capital world for, since the 80s, basically. So we're just very fortunate. And the Boston community is so rich with people like that can really help you grow and really mentor you at how you build this firm. So, the building part of the business, right, is like the way that we think about Hyperplane is like three big, sort of core, foundation to us. Number one is the investing side, right? That is all of our job, and that's the most important job. And investing in things like, sourcing, selecting, winning, servicing, exiting, and thesis, and so on. And then the second part is really around building. I mean, we're a startup, we're building our company. We've been building this business for 10 years. And in the building side is more things like the fundraising, the marketing, the operations, the finance, the offsites, the team building, everything else that comes through that talent and so on. And the third really big, most important thing to us is really personal development and wellness, right? It's like, we want to make sure that we're mentally healthy. We want to make sure that we're physically healthy. We want to make sure that, our families are really well served. And we want to make sure that, most importantly, we're growing, as humans. And one of the reasons why we have even our website, sort of our personal stories, is because we think of this, as a personal journey more so than a professional one. Entrepreneurship is, a very personal journey for most of us. And so we always grow at every stage of every business, every investment, every mistake, everything that we do. So that big part of like the personal development and wellness is truly, really, really important for us. And so I'd be very lucky that I had people to mentor on the building side, as long as, also as well as, the investing side.
So, you kind of outlined kind of your tech alignment, which was early to market of, AI, machine learning, and big data. But are there sectors that you're really going even deeper in, like, healthcare or fintech? Like,
yeah. So to give you a sense for like, Hyperplane, we have two really big buckets we invest in. One is enterprise, and then the other one is industrial tech. And so the enterprise side, John and my partner Samara, they tend to do a lot more on the enterprise investments. Things like companies like LinkSquares, for example, or AltStack. So just very traditional enterprise automation, as we call it. On the industrial side, which I sit more and I do more of that, are things like robotics or the interaction between hardware, software, Butler, Tive, local companies, although Butler is a little bit more West Coast now. So we have these two big buckets. And with these two buckets, we like certain industries, and we certainly have developed, certain industries. But at the core that we do, the way that we look at investments is always market first and founder. Those are the main two important things, right? And markets, we look, always looking for white space. Maritime industry has been one that has been really exciting for us recently. Agriculture has been really exciting for us, more recently. Robotics, certainly, we've been there for many, many years now. So there's a lot of these areas in the robotics world. It's always about, what market you're going to go to and how you're going to service that market and what are the market dynamics. And it's really, really important, particularly for seed stage, also to understand a little bit sort of the capital intensity of these businesses. We don't invest in companies that are building hardware. We invest in companies that are taking advantage of mostly commodity hardware out there and really building, sort of the software and automating, either robotics arms or whatever. So, though we call those the full stack companies in our portfolio, that tend to be more on the industrial side, 99% of the times. But also we have the enterprise side. And the enterprise side, we've done things like, legal tech has been one area that we've invested, making engineers faster, better, with alt stacks and understanding a little bit, what the day-to-days and the challenges and the bottlenecks that they have. We've done transportation in autonomous vehicles. Also, that's more, the industrial, but also has some overlap on the enterprise, since there's just a very software-driven business. And healthcare has been for us for a while. We tend to do more on the digital health side, versus we have one company in the drug discovery space that's doing quite well between Boston and San Francisco. but we're always very open and we're always very opportunistic on the markets that we look at. And again, if the founder has some insight and if the founder has great, founder market fit and, sees something that nobody else sees, but most importantly, the founder comes with this almost like, obsession about solving a very specific problem in a very large market, we're all ears.
I hope you are enjoying this interview. Just a brief word from our sponsor. As a longtime champion in the local startup ecosystem, Silicon Valley Bank supports innovative companies with the solutions and financing they need through every stage of growth. With more than 1,500 bankers and relationship advisors and $42 billion in loans through Q2 2024, SVB delivers the right people, service, and resources to support your entire financial journey. Learn more at svb.com. So now what fund are you investing out of now?
So we're investing our third fund right now. And this fund, we've invested in almost 32 businesses now. So we're sort of at the tail end of this current fund. And what we do is we invest anywhere from, let's say $500,000 up to about 2 million, 2.5 million. And we tend to lead most of the investments that we do. Sort of to backtrack a little bit, we've invested in about 75 businesses to date. We've deployed a little over $100 million or so. We tend to do about, I would say, 7 to 9, new investments per year. And that's been very steady, basically, since the very beginning of our firm. And 2025 will be no exception.
Now, how does one get a meeting with you? And then, what do you expect out of that first meeting? And then throughout your whole process, what does that look like to the point where you're actually writing a term sheet and then obviously cutting a check?
To be honest with you, I recently responded to a cold email on LinkedIn, and that turned into an investment in Toronto.
Wow.
For us in a business that basically is automating a lot of the way that you control assets for big utilities. And I know utilities is a little bit, oh my gosh, but it's actually turns out that the sales motion for the business have been much better, and they're certainly ripe for automation in many ways. But yes, to get, I've responded to cold emails. I would say that about 90% of what comes inbound here is usually from other founders in our portfolio. So we get a lot of references from existing CEOs of our businesses. And I think the other part of the inbound is the combination of, a lot of other, venture investors, smaller, larger, same size, referring a lot of things to us. That's very community-driven type, inbound for us. The outbound piece, it's a lot thesis-driven. So we have a few things that we always think about that we really like to see in the world, and we do a lot of research for that. And so that's more of an outbound outreach to companies for us. But intro to me, it's always the best through our founders, and it's always best through community. And absolutely, we'll respond to a cold LinkedIn or email or things like that, and we've done that in the past.
I mean, so I asked the question to other investors through this podcast, and it's the same. It's like if you get a warm introduction, that's kind of the preferred way of getting my attention. It is good to hear that the cold does work, but I do think if you're a founder and you can't figure out a way to get an intro to that person, you're kind of not setting yourself up for success as an entrepreneur. I just think that should be like 101 for the founder to figure out that jigsaw of how do I get to this investor through connections.
I mean, I think the most important thing for any founder, for any investor, for anyone is really networking. And, I think just it's a really good signal, no doubt about it. But sometimes it just happens that, there are founders out there that might not be from Toronto, that might not be very well connected to the industry or the Boston community. And it turns out that they also have a really great network and so on. So it happens. It's not very often, right? It's very, 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 very rarely. I think 75 businesses, maybe only 2 have been cold, for us to kind of give you a sense of it. But yes, we love, we love our community, and certainly it goes a long way for us to get through that.
Well, one of the companies that is part of your portfolio that I've just been following, that they're a customer of VentureFizz, and I had the opportunity to talk to Mike Pappas from Modulate. And I just think that is one of these companies that, classic Boston, flying under the radar, and maybe that's intentional for him, I don't know, because what they are doing is at such a massive scale. When I talk to him, he's like, yeah, we're kind of maybe second to, I don't know, YouTube as far as the processing of content and video that, or the audio that they have to go through on, because it's for gaming.
Yeah, they're second to Netflix actually, or third to Netflix, something like that. But the amount of data that they process is absolutely, I mean, it's gotten pretty incredible. So, just for background, Modulate is a company based here in Boston. The two founders, one of them was they're both MIT grads. One of them was a pretty well-respected analyst and data scientist at Bridgewater. Then joined Paul English here in Boston as one of the first engineers in some of Paul's projects, and eventually reconnected with his best friend from MIT and started Modulate. And Modulate essentially started with the mission to delete and to avoid toxicity online on voice chats. And initially it started as a voice skin. So basically what you do is that for $10 a month, we can make you sound like your favorite Game of Thrones character in a voice chat online when you're playing Minecraft or you're playing Call of Duty or Grand Theft Auto and so on. And I think that was sort of the wedge that they had at the beginning. But what we realized, again, was that the biggest problem a lot of this online, voice communities is toxicity, people being racist to each other and all kinds of really bad behavior. And so we really started with the ToxMod, which is like one of our flagship products, if not the flagship product. Started selling that about 2 to 3 years ago. And that company now has scaled to, we cover something like over 300 million users and gamers online. And they've been able to, work with some of the top game studios in the world. Grand Theft Auto had a case study, which was one of our big games more recently, just going through everything that Modulate has been able to do for them. And it turns out that if you reduce toxicity, engagement goes up. So it's really been so beneficial for them, for people that are not talking, and the engagement online. It's just absolutely an incredible company with a very, very important mission. And, one of the things about Modulate that, it's always been, the biggest surprise to me and the biggest pleasure to work with them is just the dedication that they have to the culture, to the values, to the thesis that what they're doing is just absolutely remarkable. The team that they build and the culture that they build. So absolutely love the business. Completely flies under radar in Boston, a little bit like a lot of companies here that are incredible. This one in particular has been, it's just grown so much, over the past few years, and, just absolutely so proud of the team and the mission that they have.
Yeah, such a great company in Boston. All right. So we've been through your journey, right? You moved to this country fighting cancer, build a company, it exits, start a VC firm, you're investing in all these world-class, amazing entrepreneurs. So what advice do you have to people that are kind of like maybe on the fence? Should I take the entrepreneurial leap or not?
First of all, I don't think there's ever been a better time to start a company than today. I think, from the eye tools to just the knowledge to the knowledge sharing and things like that, at the end of the day, I think if you're absolutely obsessed around a certain problem, I think that they're just, there's the opportunity of building things today, the opportunity of recruiting people and just getting your ideas off the ground is easier than it's ever been, ever. And I think at the end of the day, even if that doesn't turn out, to be, what you expect it to be a multi-billion-dollar business, I think the journey of building that company is something that you will ever forget, a regret. So it's absolutely, again, it's an amazing time to be an entrepreneur, not just in terms of like the capital going to financing businesses, but certainly the technologies that are available to you today to build upon, to build on top of it, from cloud to, AI to everything else that's available today. Just absolutely a remarkable time to do it. And there's just so many people that can support you through that journey, because the community of people that, from podcasts to all kinds of things that you can learn today, to be, to have the best chance of succeeding are, I think, at an all-time high.
Well, you've done a great job at building community as well as your own personal brand. As an investor, you were recognized by Boston Magazine as one of 10 of the most important humans behind Boston's AI revolution. You were listed by Business Insider as one of the 52 most important VCs in Boston. You were recently appointed to the board of trustees at the Mass Technology Leadership Council. You were one of the early, people building Boston New Tech. So, like, what can Boston do better to continue to foster this sense of community?
I mean, I think we talk about all the time here at the firm as well. And I think, whereas I mentioned before, sort of the spin outs and the academia part of it, I think what's been exciting, in Boston here, that is also alongside Hyperplane, there's been other firms like mine that have been built to really foster a much, better, more risk-taking, more inclusive community from the venture, side as well. I think firms like Pillar, Underscore, Glasswing, Floating Point, all kinds of firms that have been here for a while and still here have been an amazing job in the community and getting the community together. So I think that's been, fantastic. I think that if I was to say, one criticism, and I think what we can do all better is I think that there's so many other pockets like Northeastern, Babson, and so many other universities on the academia side. And I don't think necessarily we do a very good job in integrating a lot of other, pockets that are in Boston here, or maybe even just outside of Boston, like WPI. There's Maine Technical Institute. I think New England is so much larger than just Boston, right? And I think just fostering a little bit out these other communities, like WPI, for example, has an amazing program there. Being part of that, I think is absolutely, incredible. And I think also the angel community is not as organized as it used to be when I first started Hyperplane. And I think although there's probably more angels and younger and more active, back 10 years ago, there were just a lot more groups that organized the angel community better and surfaced, opportunities and ideas, to the active angel investors in the community. I don't think it's as well organized as it used to be, at least.
It's a good point, especially with the school piece. I think there was a point in time where I felt Rough Draft Ventures and the Dorm Room Fund kind of brought a nucleus of those schools together, and it just seems to kind of have lost its way. And that's just even Boston, Cambridge proper schools. But I mean, you mentioned there's WPI is amazing. UMass Lowell, Rich Miner was a graduate of that school, and all the NESCAC schools. Reed Hastings, founder of Netflix, Bowdoin grad, Bates, Colby, there's entrepreneurial pockets all over the place that are not being properly leveraged.
Yeah,
I'm sure
and
University of New Hampshire,
And totally, and I think Rough Draft and Dorm Room Fund are sort of the ones that also were in my head, because I think in addition to fostering a lot more inclusive, community here amongst the schools and the startup, both from undergrad and grad, I think they also did a really good job in showcasing a lot of the businesses we're being here in other, epicenters of the tech community, like New York, San Francisco. So they were just a really good connector, to the outside, world, if you will, right, of Silicon Valley, New York, and so on. So I think that's also a really, really important piece. Is the talent here in Boston is amazing. The companies that we're building here are absolutely world class, right, in many ways, and I think that we just need to have a little bit of better, community around these very, very early stage companies with initiatives like Rough Draft and Dorm Room and so on, which are still here, I think, but not as active as they used to be. But this whole part of it where there's so many angel investors, right, and they have their own deal flow and they're doing their own thing, and I don't think it's as organized for younger angel investors that are trying to build portfolio of investments in tech.
Yeah, that's a good point. All right, so on your profile, on your website, you talk about visiting 58 countries. So what country is your favorite to visit?
So first and foremost, it's always home, back in Albania. Although home right now has been, Boston for, since 2001. But I think other than that, one of my favorite, continents and one of my favorite countries is Kenya and Africa. Absolutely magic, to be to visit those countries there. And Iceland, I love Iceland as well. Big outdoors person, so just going there has been, it's remarkable.
All right, 3 apps you can't live without. It can't be email, calendar, or Slack.
Number one, I would say Spotify. I listen to a lot of podcasts and music when I work out and so on. Spotify, it's an important part, of my day. The second app that I love. It's also I do a lot of the weather. I sail and I play a lot of wind sports and so on. So I'm always checking the weather either here or other places that I wish I was to escape the 0-degree weather. Always looking for a next destination as well. So that's really important. And I love it. Actually, like one of the apps that I like a lot is the Economist app. I think, in venture, you tend to care only about venture at some point. And I think Economist, it's a really nice place where you just pull yourself out a little bit, and they do a great job with the podcast. So I listen to that in the morning, most of the times. And, reading, I'm a slow reader, so I don't read as much, but, podcast is the way that I consume a lot of information, and Economist does a really great job of that.
Yeah. I mean, I can't say enough. Like, people are probably bored if they listen to this podcast of me talking about Spotify, because anytime
I don't think you can ever get bored of listening to Keith and VentureFizz. So,
but it's just like I am so bullet. So I have a family plan. So like my wife and 2 daughters. But as the primary account holder, one of my favorite things about Spotify, which there's a lot of favorite things, but when they added the audiobook hour allotment as part of my subscription, I immediately was able to get rid of my Audible subscription. And I burn through audiobooks like nothing.
I love audiobooks. Yeah.
1.5, 2 times, depending on the
yeah. We have one of our founders is at 4x, and I can't
4x.
do that. Yes.
Whoa.
Eric Gasfriend, is that I cannot do. But yes, 1.5 usually. That's pretty good too. Maybe sometimes.
Oh my God!
But
yeah,
I love audiobooks. Yeah.
They're amazing. They're so amazing. I burn through a lot of books. Yeah. Speaking of podcasts, so, or audiobooks, right? So what would you recommend for a good podcast or book for entrepreneurs?
Yeah, there's a couple of things. So on the investing side, right, if your ambition is to be an investor and so on, I think one book that was really helpful to me at the beginning, coming from someone that, doesn't have an MBA, dropped out of college early on. I think Competitive Strategy, from Michael Porter has been just a really great way to like build a framework. It's sort of like a mini MBA a little bit. So this has been really great book. And it's one of those like, just fundamental things, to read. And another one that I actually enjoyed very early on was like Doing Capitalism in the Innovation Economy, from Bill Genoway. Bill Genoway, one of the early VCs in the world. And it has this like book that's like very insightful in sort of the theory of venture capital. And I thought that was just really well done. On the building side, company building side, a couple of things that I've enjoyed. One of them was a book called Startup by Jerry Kaplan. And Startup is the story of a company in Silicon Valley that essentially had everything, had the best investors on their board, had the best product, had the most amount of money, had the most, cachet to hire whoever they wanted, just incredible talent all around. And it completely failed as a business. And I think the most important lessons, building companies and everything we do comes from failure. So I think it's really, really important, to also understand that side. That if I was to match that with something, with a documentary, I think General Magic would be a really good documentary to watch as you read Startup. But I think it's a really, really well done book. And another one recently, it's a book called Built, by Tony Fadell, who built Nest. And Tony, in this book, agree with him or not, has a lot of really good frameworks, in that book. And I think it's just so important for any founder, for any investor to just have frameworks around everything. It's like, I feel like the worst thing you can do is not have frameworks. And I think he has really good, really good story first and foremost, building a really cool and really great product, but also just like the way that he built that business. I thought it was, it was just a really great read.
Well, you kind of already said, but like outside of work, you said you like, wind sports, but what else do you like to do?
I love photography. It's been a passion of mine. I love art a lot, and photography. When I first moved to the US, was a really good way, to keep track of, people and just obsessed with memories. At the time going through, through that, and I don't have, I don't write a lot, and so photography was a really good way, to keep memories and to look back at this. And so there's been a big passion for a long time now. That. And outside of that, I think I'm a very active person. So sports, it means a lot, from skiing to tennis to sailing to all kinds of things. So I try to really, a lot of physical, things. And I love to actually restore also old sailboats. It's another passion that has been in the last like 5-6 years. And, I've had a few that I've restored, and that's been a really, just awesome to like just work with your hands. And, unlike venture, you get the feedback right away if you're doing a good job or not.
That's cool. That's a great hobby. I mean, I am so not handy, and to restore something, I would be such a mess. But maybe as I get into retirement, that would be something fun that I would just learn how to do things like that I just don't have the mental capacity to handle right now. But that would be really fun. So, all right. Thank you so much, Vivjan, for taking the time to walk us through your background story. Obviously, your story is extraordinary in terms of what you've been able to accomplish each step along the way. Obviously, all the great work that you're doing as an investor with you and your colleagues at Hyperplane, and obviously all the great advice.
Yeah, well, I appreciate the time here, and I'm also thankful for you and VentureFizz and everything that you've done for the community since the very beginning when we first met. So, just awesome to be here, and thank you very much.